What's up builders, it's me, Jimbotron, back at you with another video. In today's video, I will be bringing you a Ramattra build, as promised yesterday. Now, I've seen a lot of Vortex and Primary Fire builds out there. However, I do think this is quite a unique build in both build and playstyle. Introducing the Flying Ramattra. So this build is basically all about move speed and hyper mobility. You can do some crazy tech like the Super Glide and instant kill punch tech. Overall, this build is going to take a little while to master, but it's super powerful. Let's get into it. So the core of the build revolves around a power and an item. The power being Breakout. This is kind of bad on its own. The dash is nice, however, if you take this power first, you're probably going to lose a lot of your games. If you rush this too quickly, it's inefficient. Basically, with Breakout, you unlock two new techs. The first one being the instant killer I showed. To do this, you just punch. Press block immediately after punching. Press punch again as you block. You will perform two quick succession punches that are capable of doing a lot of damage when done frame perfect. Then the second one is with Swirling Wind, where you can use Breakout followed by a jump. The movement speed and jump height from Swirling Wind will allow you to launch yourself into people's backlines. And you can do some pretty crazy stuff with this, like some crazy rollouts and even taking down some flyers out of the air sometimes. First, let's go over the powers. So the first power that I like to take here is Final Form, since in order to do the tech later down the line, we are going to need to be inside of our own vortexes. It just makes sense to take the power that allows us to heal while doing so. This will massively increase your sustain and ultimate charge generation, as it's roughly 240 healing if you stand for the full duration of the vortex. It can also really help sustain through large amounts of damage whilst blocking. As you have a 75% damage reduction while blocking, that 240 healing needs to be countered with 960 damage if they want to prevent you from healing. The second power is the mentioned Breakout. I already showed you all the techs you can do with this, but it's also nice for closing the gap, especially when it comes to extending the duration of annihilation by being able to close the gap to your enemies quicker for more ult time. This one does take a while getting used to, however, it is very strong when you do. Up next, we have Second Phase. Now, this will allow you to reset your Ravenous Vortex on Nemesis form, allowing you to basically have twice the amount of usage on your Vortex. It pairs really nice with an item that we will be taking later that I'll get into. However, even on its own, with the healing, it is very nice. You can even double stack the Final Form healing by throwing the Vortex down using Nemesis and then throwing another one down. You'll be able to double your healing output. And then, last but not least, we have Ravaging Vortex. You already have two powers spec'd into Vortex, so this just kind of makes sense. This last one can be anything. You will be mainly using the Vortexes on yourself anyway for Final Form value. So if you want to go for something else here, feel free. Now we're on to items. So just a quick niche tip for you here, guys. If you take Feathered Souls and Electrolytes in round 1, you can have 55% move speed out of spawn. Combining that with the additional move speed we'll be taking from Swirling Ward later and the 20% speed from Nemesis form, Ramattra can get to the point quicker than even Tracer in some cases. Okay, so the first item I'm going to say is a must pick is obviously Swirling Ward. We already established that. The stats on this are insane. 15% ability power and 10% cooldown reduction for 10,000 is insanely high value considering how expensive cooldown reduction usually is. On top of that, you're getting the jump height and move speed bonuses during Vortex, which is exactly what you need to do all of the tech that is required to get this build fully functioning. I am guilty of taking this round 2, but I would hold off until round 3 if you can. In the meantime though, you can definitely be taking Voracious Maelstrom. Now this is the item that I said would pair really well with Second Phase. So basically, every enemy you hit with Ravenous Vortex will reduce the Nemesis form cooldown by a second. This is nice, as you can get up to 5 seconds of cooldown instantly on your secondary form. When you use the secondary form, you can get an instant reset on your Ravenous Vortex. This just massively increases the amount of uptime you can have on the Nemesis form, which increases your healing and the uptime you can deal on the tech. This really just pieces everything together. However, you do need to use second phase to get the full value from it. Another strong blue is Omnium Augment. Now this will increase your pummel range by 25% and the damage by 10%. Honestly, a really strong pickup, especially since we're going to be spending a lot of time in Nemesis form. The range is super nice. Now, after we've picked up Swirling Ward, the next purple we want to try and get, if it's not too expensive, is Anima of Anubis. The stats are okay, not that great for the cost. However, we're taking this for the fact that Pummel's damage is increased by ability power now. In my prediction video, I said that his Nemesis form would be hybrid stats. I was only partially correct, as you actually require this to be able to hybrid build. If we take this, any item that gives both ability power and weapon power is now twice as viable to us, so we definitely want to be picking this up. Then, because we picked that up, we are going to want to take some hybrid items. Jet Skates is a very strong pick here, as we are heavy into mobility between Breakout and Swirling Ward, so another mobility item really helps put the cherry on top. We have the Anima of Anubis, which is actually 20% damage on our Nemesis form and an additional 10% on our ultimate. The dash doesn't need to be spoken about. Another really strong item like this is Phantasmic Flux, yet again another 20% damage. I will note that in testing, even though Pummel will scale with ability power from Anima, it actually doesn't count for lifesteal. You will only get 15% lifesteal from this, but you'll still get the ability lifesteal during your ultimate anyway, which is nice. And some flex pickups that we can grab because we don't have much survival here. Martian Mender. This will heal us for 3% of our max life every second, and it also feeds into the cooldown narrative that we're going for. This 3% max life per second, whilst we're blocking, requires our opponents to deal 12% of our max life per second in damage to even begin to move our health bar. As long as we are in Nemesis form, our sustain is absolutely insane. Definitely worth a pickup on most tanks, but specifically Ramattra and Hazard for their blocking. This will also help us heal while we're in the backline and don't have much sustain. On top of that, everything that was spoken about, maybe you just want some more stats. The best ways to get these are Rüstung von Wilhelm for more max life, Champion's Kit for more ability power, Eye of the Spider for weapon power. It doesn't really matter which ones you go for, it just depends on what stats you feel you need. Just a quick one on the matchups for this build. Ramattra at his core can play pretty much all three roles in Stadium very well. Poke, Brawl, and Dive are all in his playstyle, and this is a very dive-oriented build because of how much mobility we are building into. Because this is Dive, by the laws of the Triad, we are weak into Brawl characters. This is because we aren't building much sustain and are mainly going for damage and move speed. In a brawl fight between a Reinhardt or a Junker Queen, we will be out-damaged 9 times out of 10, and there will be nothing that we can do about this. If you run into those characters, I sternly suggest you run the primary fire build, or even just a pure survival Nemesis form build, as you would have a much better chance in a brawl in those circumstances. However, if the enemy team has a lot of poke, if they mainly consist of characters that like to sit in the backline and shoot from a distance, this build can be very, very oppressive, especially with how hard it is to keep up with it. Also, because your Ravenous Vortex move speed and jump height don't also apply to just you, they apply to your entire team. This is really strong with characters that like to dive or like to take high ground. Think Genji, for example. Being able to amp up a Genji's jump and move speed will enable him to dive more easily. Or think Soldier 76. Imagine how lethal Soldier 76 would be during his ultimate if he is able to jump to the skybox every time he jumps. So try and pair it with teams that would benefit from the jump high also. Now then, as for ratings, let's get into that. As always, we'll be starting off with impact. This is how much of an impact I think this build makes on a game. Full disclaimer here, guys. I've played this build for maybe 5 games at most, just because RAM has only just come out and I needed to get this content to you. so these rankings might be a bit inaccurate. In my experience with this build, it's very strong. It won't output as many stats as the other builds, however, it has significantly better mobility and positioning. If you have a high level of game sense, I think you'll find that this build will get more value for you than the other builds. I'm going to give this one an A for impact. I don't think this is a hyper carry tank like Junker Queen or Hazard, but I definitely think this has a lot of potential. Up next, we have early game. A Final Form Round 1, in my opinion, is an absurdly strong power. Its cash generation is really nice, and on top of that, you will sustain a lot more during Nemesis form. Also, we have two very strong blue items in Voracious Maelstrom and Omnium Augment, so our round 2 is crazy strong. I would definitely give this build a 9 out of 10 for the early game, only because it doesn't sustain as much as Royal Bullet's Junker Queen, which is the only 10 I have in the early game. However, I think this is one of the strongest close seconds. As for scaling, the moment that we pick up Swirling Ward and Anima of Anubis, we have all of the move speed we need, and our Nemesis form scales twice as fast as it normally would. When we get to round 4, we have the second use of Vortex from second phase. Put all this together, and I think this build scales incredibly well. High damage output in the late game, high mobility in the mid game, strong sustain in the early game. Overall scaling for this build is going to have to be an 8 out of 10. And last but not least, we have the fun factor. Let's not dance around it, it's a 10 out of 10. Now, obviously this guy is new and fresh, so there will be a bit of bias here. However, I think, compared to all the other Ramattra builds I've tried and tested, what's more fun than launching yourself and your entire team 50 feet up into the air, straight into the back line, where you can get to work? The answer is nothing. This is one of the most fun builds in the game, never mind just on Ramattra, so an easy 10 out of 10 for me. Overall, I'm scoring this build an 8.5 out of 10, and I definitely think it should be something that you check out. Okay, that's everything for today, builders. I hope you enjoyed and found out a lot from this. I do have a Discord link down below where you can share clips, and I'd love to see what you guys get up to with this, so make sure to join that.